The first time I ever visited France, in Walt Disney World's Epcot, I was instantly reminded of somewhere. Yes, France. But a very specific version of France. Namely, the version of Paris imagined by Elizabeth, aka Anna DeWitt, in Bioshock Infinite, Burial at Sea, Part 2. In this video, I'm going to examine how these two different renderings of Paris ended up being so similar, the overlap between them, and consider what makes this particular sanitized vision of the city so compelling. It won't have escaped you that neither of these things is a dead mall, or even a live mall, but I've always felt that theme parks and malls are pretty closely related, if not brothers, cousins at the very least. After all, Podcast The Ride often slips into mall territory, with features like the City Walk saga and the Downtown Disney ordeal as the most compelling examples. I know for a fact that the PTR boys have talked about watching dead mall videos. Maybe they've even seen one on this channel. All of that makes sense, since theme park intangibles like theming and sanitization are at the core of many active malls. Not to mention a whole lot more that have been blandified and beiged up since the 80s. Disney World and Disneyland, perhaps better than anywhere else in the world, continue to champion incredibly detailed theming as a vital part of the retail experience. And theme park though it may be, Epcot's World Showcase is very much a retail experience. Which tracks perfectly given Walt Disney's original vision for Epcot. Conceived as an experimental prototype community of tomorrow, there's a film from 1966 in which Disney lays out his plan. In short, a tightly controlled, de-urbanized community in which there will be no crime, which implies a heavy police presence, no land ownership, meaning no voting rights, no unemployment, and no retirees. The emphasis would be on walkability and efficient public transportation, and a reliance on, or at least a relationship with, corporate sponsors. There's a term for the original vision of Epcot: a benevolent dictatorship. And is the obsessive embrace of Mickey Mouse iconography, emblazoned across most visitors' t-shirts and hoodies through to hidden Mickeys scattered around the parks, really all that different to the cult of personality often associated with dictators, such as Bioshock Zachary Comstock? Maybe that's an issue too big to get into right now. It would be easy to argue that, like Bioshock's portrayal of Paris, Epcot's World Showcase offers up an idealised version of each featured country's past. Take the United Kingdom for example, which features thatched roof cottages, red phone boxes, a couple of pubs, and a fish and chip shop. A modern rendering of the UK would more likely feature a Primark, a JD Sports, and a betting shop. And okay, probably still a couple of pubs and a fish and chip shop. But there's more to these portrayals than merely presenting an idealised version of a country's past. Instead, we're presented with extremely specific visual cues. Morris columns covered with printed advertisements, window boxes full of flowers, paintings of the Seine, which are designed to make us feel like we're somewhere we may never even have been. That's exactly what Disney is doing, but it's not immediately clear why. When I started work on this video, I immediately started thinking about Paris syndrome. It's an extreme form of culture shock that affects a small percentage of visitors who are disappointed by the city's failure to live up to their romanticised expectations. For some reason, it's particularly associated with tourists from Japan, where it's known as Paris Shokogun. Symptoms can include delusional states, hallucinations, feelings of persecution, depersonalization, and anxiety. Sounds to me a lot like a really severe panic attack. And honestly, I kinda get it. I consider the shot from Ratatouille in which Remy discovers that he's been living underneath Paris one of the most beautiful in modern cinema. It was my desktop wallpaper for years. I'm not a Disney adult, I swear. Contrast this with some of my actual experiences of Paris, where 3 different people attempted to scam me, the Eiffel Tower was surrounded by a bunch of ugly metal fencing and scaffolding, and my dad was almost loaded into the back of a truck while using a porta potty. Granted, that last one might be on him rather than Paris. There's a great article on The Atlantic that says the following about Paris syndrome. It's no secret that the representation of Paris in entertainment is a limited one. Watching movies set in Paris leaves one with an image of the city that is quaint, friendly, affluent, and likely still in black and white. When we use Paris in advertisements, it's invariably some non-threateningly attractive young woman riding a bike around the side streets or skipping down the Champs-Élysées. The 3 stops of a Parisian's day, according to the Japanese media, are a cafe, the Eiffel Tower, and Louis Vuitton. Sounds a lot like Epcot's France Pavilion. Allée des Marchands, seen here, translates as Street of Merchants. True to the sign, this street is filled with kiosks selling ratatouille merch and pseudo-Parisian knickknacks. And at the end of the day, that's what this all comes back to. At Disney, we always exit through the gift shop. And although life in Bioshock appears a little bit cheaper, capitalist consumption is still at the forefront of the experience. Elizabeth visits a bookstore to purchase a book, only to find out that it hasn't been written yet, a danger of trying to live in an illusion. But other locals attempt to present her, or you, with paintings, baguettes, and bird cages as the player character walks around. Burial at Sea's transition from the pastel-coloured beauty of Paris to the darker, gritty version of the city when Elizabeth starts chasing Sally is truly horrifying. It's a feeling that will be familiar to anyone who has had to readjust to the real world after spending any length of time in the Disney bubble. You know what? Maybe I am a Disney adult. In this version of Paris, and perhaps the real one as well, capitalist consumption is the last thing on our mind. Not least because the bookstore is literally on fire. In Elizabeth's words, there's a world of difference between what we see and what is. The Atlantic article I referenced earlier comments that the world seems determined to represent Paris as perpetually spinning inside a little girl's music box. This disparity between what we see and what we get hits tourists, and it hits some of them very hard. In an old episode of Friends, Joshua's parents return home early from a trip to Europe. Oh, we cut the trip short, they say. France sucks. So you didn't even get to Italy, Joshua, or Joshua, as Rachel might have it, adds. Yep, answers his father. Sucks. Would I ever say something as inflammatory as Epcot's France is better than the actual country? Of course not. What I might say is that just as Elizabeth's Paris fulfills her own desires, Epcot's France aligns more closely with what tourists might hope to experience when they visit Paris. And they're happy to spend more as a result. Case in point, at the time of this video's production, hundreds of thousands are actively protesting pension reform throughout France, resulting in violence, arson, and looting. In other words, some very different scenes to this one. And this one. But however compelling the illusion might be, all good things must come to an end. In the case of Bioshock, that might mean impassable black gates guarded by cats, or the end of the level. With Disney, it can be more difficult to tell. I never did work out if these miniature paintings were actually for sale or not. But you can always rely on something like the Skyliner to break the spell for you. After all, how else could you be flying past the City of Lights one minute, and rapidly heading through maintenance areas towards swampy Florida wetlands the next? And if that isn't enough to bring you back to reality, the credit card bill landing on your doormat surely will. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Likes and subscribes are always appreciated, and you'll find a link to my Instagram and some different ways to support the channel in the description below. Until next time, goodbye from two equally beautiful and eerily similar takes on Paris.